Hello. So I wanted to record this quick video and talk a little bit about family constellations and what it is. We do this family constellations with Daya on Thursdays in Palo Alto at 7 o'clock. And a lot of times people not don't know about what it is about this method, and so they ask us questions. And I really wanted to, or me and Ty, we talked about recording something or writing an article about our understanding of what family constellations are and how they can be helpful. So, in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about my understanding, maybe different from what other people think or, with other perspectives, but this is what this is how I see family constellations method. So, family constellations is a form of healing. It's a healing modality that resolves problems, symptoms on a deep level. And the roots of this modality, the main ideas of this modality are that some problems, some symptoms, some patterns do not originate with us. There's a wonderful book by Mark Wallen called It Didn't Start With You, and it talks a lot about this, that a lot of times we inherit trauma, inherit symptoms, inherit illnesses. And so in order to resolve it, we cannot just work with a person. Working with a person is not effective because the root of the problem is not in this person's history. And so family constellations looks at the ancestry, looks at the lineages, and uproots, and brings to the consciousness, brings to awareness, brings up what has been stored in this particular person's lineage. So let me give you an example that it's common example with us who are of Russian origin, is that a lot of trauma happened in World War II. And so let's say an example is that there's a woman and she has deep-rooted depression, and she goes to psychotherapy, she tries different modalities, different healings, and she just cannot address that. The symptom keeps returning and she keeps feeling depressed. And so for someone like her, we would constellate it. We would pick a representative for her. So representation is a tool in this modality. This modality is done in a group setting. So usually there's a client and there's a group. And then in the group are also those who represent. So group consists of those who represent representatives. You don't have to be a representative to come and observe the work. And if you want just to observe, that's fine too. But most people come to experience it, and you really need to represent in order to experience the work. So most people who come to the healing circles, to these meetings, they are also representatives. And representatives are those who represent different problems and issues, patterns, family members for this client. So say we're working with a woman with depression, and the facilitator will sit down with her and talk a little bit about her issue. I don't want to call it issue as just a struggle that she has. She doesn't want to be depressed. She wants to feel more alive and vibrant and happier. And so we'll start there. Clients will sit down with facilitator and talk about what is it that she wants from this constellation. What is the purpose? What is the goal? what is the direction, what is the end result that she wants to have after this constellation is facilitated. And this is really, really important, because without the direction of where are we going, we can end up in various different places. And so it's very important for client to have a clear goal of, or wish or desire for the end result of a constellation. So when the client and facilitator sit down, they talk a little bit about what this client would like to have as a result of this work. And the facilitator listens to maybe underlying emotions in their conversation. So here's where each facilitator has a maybe different style. I usually listen for most charged words in client's description, or where the most clear, or the most like their certainty, or perhaps where they disappear. So if say I'm sitting with a client and they're talking about something, and then there's like a dropping feeling for me, then maybe I have a sense that there's trauma here, and that's something to consider. So facilitators usually use a lot, and some facilitators don't work this way, but I think me and Taya would both use our intuition quite a bit, our own representation, our own sense of what's coming up for this client, and that's for us, it's indication of what kind of things we're going to be working in this constellation. So after we talk about this end result that the client wants, the facilitator decides of what's going to be constellated, meaning what are some representations that they're going to be working with. And so they are selecting, like say in this example, maybe I decide that I want to be working with this woman, so I'm going to select the woman. So I'm going to say, well, okay, select a representative for yourself, and she's going to select a representative for herself. And then I decide that I want to work with the symptom, with depression. And so I'll say, okay, select someone to represent your depression. So she selects someone to represent her depression. It's going to be a person representing depression. And so she's going to put this to people in the circle, in our working circle. There's like a certain area inside the circle that going to be, that's where constellation unfolds. And then we observe what happens. And the idea and the practice shows that through representation, through this attention of us and putting representation of the patterns in human bodies, the hidden, the unconscious, the unknown patterns show up through the representation, through the bodies. And usually a client is not aware of what's causing it. Of course, if the client knew what's causing her depression, she would be able to resolve it, but she's not. And so she's looking for help with that. And through Family Constellation, it's uncovered. So when we look at depression can, by the way, transform into something else. Usually we try to be as specific as possible. So sometimes it's not ideal to put abstract things like depression, but sometimes we can. And usually a lot of times it's quickly transformed into someone whose the symptom belongs, or even facilitator can put someone saying like, well, let's put someone who this really belongs to, because what happens in our systems, and that's what Bert Hellinger discovered and formulated in his laws, orders of love, is that a lot of times in our system, if a person is unable to live through his or her feelings, they still reside in this person system lineage in so-called field. And field is, I see field as energy field that surrounds us. And so this particular lineage, this particular system can have each particular system, each particular lineage family has its own family field. Can be called family soul, but it doesn't matter what it's called. The main issue, the main point here is that there is a energetic field where all feelings are stored if they are not lived through. So if we feel the feelings and live them fully, they're not stored there. They just pass through us and they dissipate and they go on to circulate in the energy field. But if something is not lived through, if something is denied, if something is suppressed, if it's too much for this person to live through this, then it gets stored in a field, a family, this family energetic field and family soul. And then the next person who is born inherits this feeling. So it picks them up unconsciously as a way to serve the system, as a way to help the system, as a way to heal the system. Because everything that's unhealed is gonna keep trying to get healed. It's gonna be, that's like the universal law, is that anything that's unhealed, unwhole, is trying to get whole, is trying to get healed. And so that's the movement there, soul movement. And so this, in our example of constellation, we can quickly see that sometimes this depression transformed as a lot of times it's parents. Most of our parents inherited from our parents. Most of our feelings we pick up from parents because they're the closest and with this to us, and they are also two people that we love the most in children, and we want to serve and love them so much. And but sometimes it's also going to be grandparents. Usually it's 3-4 generations maximum. It's could be further. I haven't seen many of this. Usually it's parents or grandparents. And so a lot of us who are grandchildren of those who participated in, say, World War II, fought through our Russian Soviet lineage, a lot of things are actually connected to the war. And so, say in this particular example, we say put depression, and then it transforms into her grandfather who was in the war, and he just couldn't take the suffering of someone who saw the war, and he was devastated because so much suffering happened, and it just was impossible for him to feel it. He in order to survive, he needed to suppress it. He needed to disconnect from the sorrow of war, and so the sorrow got stored in the family field. And then later, when this granddaughter was born, and say her parents also just couldn't, or say just couldn't really deal with it also, and so when she was born, she picked it up and she took it on, and so now she is depressed. And so we will be working with disconnecting her from the symptom of depression, who doesn't belong to her. It belongs to her grandfather who couldn't live through the war, and that when she was born, she picked it up unconsciously. And in the constellation, we will be working on freeing her from needing to carry this load for the family, and returning to where it belongs, and healing it through our bodies, through our healing circle through the attention, through the facilitators, using techniques and methods, but most importantly through this field, because the healing happens through the natural movement of the field. It's a little bit of an abstract concept, but the most important thing is that healing happens because field wants to be whole and wants to be healed, and that's the good news. And the most profound way to experience family constellations is to participate in them, because what I talked about here, it sounds a little bit abstract, but it's phenomenological method, meaning is that it's discovered by observation, it's discovered by experiencing it. Because our understanding of it is not like, we can't really explain what the field really is yet, because maybe we don't have the tools to measure it, but we know it works, and we know in constellations, certainly something happens, you can feel it. And so come and experience this work. We welcome participants, observers, and I'm probably going to record a second video of what the presentation is like and what is it for. Again, in this video, I just wanted to explain what family constellations are, how the process works, and what happens and how healing happens. And again, this example, we worked with a woman whose depression was something she inherited from her grandfather, who didn't survive, who didn't live through it in World War II. And so she picked it up unconsciously and carried it for him. And without knowing where it belongs, she couldn't, like, say, address it in psychotherapy, because it's not something that hers. And so the movement that was needing for her to be healed is that she needed to return these feelings to her grandfather, but not even to return it as to like give it back, but more they needed to be lived through in a constellation through their bodies, and that's what happens in a constellation. And so a lot of times people do feel better right away after constellation. They experience the relief. Sometimes the work is more gradual. Sometimes it's not as simple as I described here. So not all symptoms can be returned to, they don't necessarily originate with our with our parents or grandparents. So it could be more complicated than that. But this is a good example of what a lot of this work is. So hope this is helpful. Let me know if there's any questions. And again, I'm happy to record more videos on what this work is and how it works, because I love talking about it and I love sharing this work that I deeply love. So I'll see you in our circle and in the next meeting. Thank you.